my side, real estate and facilities, to come here, is in the architect's due diligence, they found that within about a 2-block radius, all of the properties within that 2-block radius have the ability to be attached to 2 separate SRP substations. SRP is Salt River Project, which is the local electrical utility. In our fruition of design, when all 3 phases were complete, the site would attach to both substations simultaneously, one drawing from one transformer on one substation and the same from the other.
So you got reverse feeds coming in, it's redundant.
So
Yeah,
right now,
one right now.
we only have one right now.
Okay.
The feed is in the dirt lot behind Earnhardt Ford on Ray Road in this property's name.
Did you guys ever do any math to figure out how much it costs to drag it out here?
They'll basically get it to the site. Then our responsibility is to grab it from the driveway and pull it in the rest of the way.
Okay.
It was all,
But the infrastructure's there to do it.
Conduits are there, right?
for the most part.
Drag it in from the
And
driveway
We'll see the conduits when we go through that side.
to here.
So,
What's missing in your understanding?
well, we need first, SRP won't give you anything without the justification of projected load.
Right.
So we need to get the feed from there. I had the extra money in advance, so I bought the bigger pad, and I'll show you where the conduits show up in the building. And then there's the generator yard and the generator, and then the sectional cooling and power distribution and UPS and transfer switchgear.
Okay.
So on the back side here, these are the emergency exits for one of the battery rooms and the 2 electric rooms. Even though this isn't the tallest building in the complex, as an extra safety measure, we put a grounding grid that runs around the perimeter of the main roof superstructure, and it also sits on the taller package units on the roof.
Cool.
So,
On the discussion about redundancy, Alan,
yeah.
if they need to bring in additional load beyond the 3 megawatts or whatever that are here, that's probably possible, right?
SRP has a surplus of power in the area,
Yeah,
so it's just a matter of being able to justify it.
yeah.
The bank had the conversation several times, but the IT group could never justify the next level up
Okay.
due to,
How many racks did you have inside? Or do you have inside?
we can count them when we get in there, the number escapes me at the moment.
I
But
guess I think it's, is it 100 to 120 racks per megawatt essentially? It's a number that I've heard. I don't know if it's something you understand or.
it's kind of dimly back there. We can research it and find
Yeah.
out. So, so right now we're on the day 1 transformer, which is, we've upgraded from the original 1,000 kilowatt transformer. We moved to 1,500 kilowatts on year 1 of our operation. So in the phase 2 of design, we would request the second transformer from SRP at its full size, which was 3,000 kilowatts. We would put the transformer on its pad, which is designed for that, put the generator yard down there, and the existing site demand would switch off of this one into that one, then allowing the third phase, which would upgrade this to 3,000 kilowatts and change out the pre-existing 1,500 kilowatt generator for a similar one at the 3,000 kilowatt range.
So, real quick, just to make sure I understand what you just said, because it was a lot. 1,500. So this is 1.5 megawatts.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's stenciled on.
And this was what you put in the first. At the
Well,
very-
it was originally 1,000 kilowatts, but we outgrew it pretty quick. So we upgraded to the 1,500 based on the IT team's demands.
And so that you were gonna transition to another transformer
Yeah, they were going to give us the 3,000
over here.
once we could justify it because they didn't want to keep leveling us up at 500 kilowatts a shot.
Okay.
So they basically said, we know you're ultimately working to have two 3,000 kilowatt setups. It's very expensive for them to have to redo the undergrounds and everything else every single time,
Yeah.
to say nothing about the cost and risk for the bank, since
Yep.
we had to run on roll-up generator the whole time. So they basically said, if you can show us on paper the IT calculations and a reasonable time frame when you can get a good chunk of that, we'll just be done with this scaling 500 kilowatts at a time and go from there.
So there would be, at the end of this plan, there would be two
Two 3,000 kilowatt
6,000
generators.
total.
So one would come from the feed that we aren't attached to right now, and one would use our present feed, which comes from over by the Cardinals practice facility.
So there need to be to take advantage of the 3 megawatts that are here presently, or 3,000 kilowatts, I guess is maybe a better way to say it. You need to upgrade this to a 3,000 or create a new 3,000 kilowatt
Yeah,
transformer.
it should really split off. Right now, this is single point of failure, which affects part of our tiering.
Okay.
That there's some redundancy inside, but it's not 100%.
But right now, even though there's technically 3 megawatts to the site, 1.5 are being transferred into the building.
Only 1.5 exists.
Okay. Oh wait, only 1.5 exists or 3 exists here?
Only 1,500 kilowatts.
So I'm confused now. So then
There's the potential for more, we just have to justify it to the utility.
and the line to justify to get up to 3 is already here.
The conduits are
Conduit.
here.
Oh, so,
Yeah.
okay, so the capacity is not here yet.
Yeah.
So additional
That's
capacity
why-
to get to 3,
yeah.
and then an additional capacity from over here to get to 6. Am I getting confused?
Yeah.
Additional capacity
Because
bring
it's
this up to-
basically, we don't want to work on this while this is a live data center. So by having the second setup, we can, if we can justify it and not have to level up 500 kilowatts at a time, because of the expense and hassle, naturally there's a considerable amount of risk. If we can show them the projections, we can just go straight to 3,000 unless they've changed it. But I don't believe they have. Because that was a lot of downtime on their part, to say nothing what it did to the bank. So it would basically be justify the 3,000 and get that first, and then work on the upgrades on the day one side afterwards.
Okay, so then one kind of summary question. What is the maximum amount of power that you could get knowing that you have power coming from that direction and in this direction to the site?
2 feeds of 3,000 kilowatts apiece,
Gotcha.
So that's 6 megawatts.
Roughly, right?
roughly.
Yeah.
So roughly 6 megawatts we could bring into the site. And the conduits are set up for that.
But currently,
The conduits are set
Set up.
up, but the wiring isn't.
right, so
Okay.
currently you've only got 1,500 you've got 1.5 megawatts. Even though there's a conduit here for 3,000 coming from this direction.
Gotcha.
And you can set up you can run another conduit from that direction that'll get you an additional 3. So even though there's 3 megawatts here, there's only really 1.5 today. And I'm saying that to Lou so that he's got an idea of,
Yeah.
some of the additional costs it's gonna give there too. Not to mention.
Did you guys get
the
cost estimates on,
power's kinda like the-
completing the project?
Yeah,
It was about 10 years ago, so it's not relevant anymore.
Okay.
sounds like fiber's easier to solve. Okay, sorry.
No worries.
I've got a simple brain, so we gotta.
No. So, no big
Alan, I
deal.
want to understand, when you setting the transformer there, the power company will set it at their cost, or do we pay for it?
You pay for it over time. They basically will
Bring it to the
charge
street.
you from the foot of the driveway all the way up and in, and there's a deposit you have to put for the transformer.
They're going to charge you just to pull cable, though. I mean,
And make
the
the
expensive work is done by having the conduits
That's
there
right.
underground, right?
Most of it,
Yeah, yeah.
These conduits exist. The ones coming from that direction to get above 3 don't exist.
Yeah.
Or if
Oh,
you
I
want.
thought
They're
they
to
did.
the-
I thought
to
the
the
next
site.
3
No,
conduits
they're not.
exist.
He said that they're all the
Yeah,
way
no.
out there.
No,
and he's got to drag them to the
Right.
street.
Well, the conduits are to the site, and then you bring it from the site
Yeah.
to the transformer.
Those caps right there are conduits that lead to that street, right?
They lead to the equipment room.
Yeah, to the equipment room.
Yeah.
There are no
There's-
conduits from there to the
It's
street?
stubbed there, it's just not complete.
Okay. So there's still trenching that would have to take place to put
Yeah.
additional conduits in. Okay.
So they're going to have to trench to us, and we have to make up a little difference.
Okay.
But it was easy. We only had so much money left over, so we got as far as we could, but that's where we ran out of money.
Understood.
Sounds like
But-
sounds like a TI conversation with your tenant or with your landlord.
Well, the bank,
TIs are inside, aren't they?
well, the bank had intended to buy the property on year 3 before the mortgage world fell apart. So most of the prep is there. It's just a matter of doing a little fiddly work here and there.
Gotcha.
In the vast scheme of things, it's not a huge thing.
No, I think compared to a lot of places, this has a lot.
Because
Is this where the generator is?
Yes, we'll go in there next. So we've done tons of planning and prep. We just need to make it to its full fruition. Just for the sake of seeing it, this is Electric Room E. Electric Room E handles the power management for utilizing load bank, utilizing roll-up generator, or utilizing the current SRP transformer. We left space in the switchgear for additional modules to come online as the design allows. So this is the site 1,500 kilowatt generator yard. We purposely built the yard larger to allow for the 3,000 kilowatt generator to ultimately put in an appearance. So the factory generator is not meant for Arizona's high temperature environment. So we have the Rocore refit radiator, which will allow us in the hottest part of summer to maintain power to the site should we lose the SRP feed. As you can see, the core is considerably thicker on the radiator than a traditional factory enclosure radiator.
What's the rating for time?
If the generator fuel tank is 100% full, we can run for 24 hours. I have 2 fuel services available.
Based on 1.5 kilowatt or 1.5 megawatt.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have 2 fuel services available here in the valley that both can make it here in less than 4 hours, though we've never had a 24-hour outage.
What's
Is this-
the performance been on the power?
It's been pretty good. We've typically had 1 outage a year. Commonly, it's somebody has ran into a power pole and we've had to go on the generator. SRP in this section of the valley has got some good redundancy. So a lot of times they can route past where the damage is, and then they'll send me the details on when they're gonna switch over. And they commonly do it at 10 o'clock at night to avoid disrupting during business hours. They're not always able to achieve that, but most of the time they do.
So when you do have an outage, it's usually only for a minute or?
It's, well, some of the routing has to be done by their technicians in person, so, but they're not too far away from us. They're just up on Elliott Road.
Right.
And so it's not a huge drive. There's always somebody on standby there. So typically the outages are in the roughly 2-hour range. Sometimes,
And you're operating on this?
yeah. So sometimes the police and fire don't always allow SRP to get to it right away, but most outages are commonly in the 2-hour range based on,
And you say that's maybe once a year?
if that.
What's the maintenance? What's the service and maintenance been on this since the bank closed?
It basically hasn't had much run hours. I run the thing myself just in hand, just for the sake of exercising it.
Yeah.
We would want to do commissioning for the major gear as you would do at any data center.
Right.
But it's the wrong time of the year to load bank it because the weather's so mild.
Right.
but I've got past load bank reports in my desk. If
From
you,
2016?
it's basically, the bank basically cut out the extras towards the end, but
Understood. So.
we've got the
2015.
history for the site, and we load banked every year until we were cut off, and we did the infrared scans every year, and we fixed everything as we were scanning. Very rarely did we find anything.
Plenty of parking.
So, stucco from the stucco Cox factors.
So they put up razor wire and put some dogs back there.
Any issues with asbestos or anything like that?
No, the building is too new to have any problems like that.
The building was built in 2000.
Yeah.
So in the void space here, next to the main chiller yard, is where we would put the load bank or the roll-up generator when the need calls for it.
So what are we looking at here?
Main chiller yard,
Main chiller yard?
which provides the cooling for the electric rooms and the central computer room. So to use the roll-up generator or the load bank, we're able to run the cables through the guarded access points. They will come up. This is normally locked, but I've got it unlocked for the tour. The cables will come up through this rubber grommeted connection to land on the bar. I've got the phase rotation marked on there to attach properly. And then in the corner, we have the battery charger connection point. So the battery charger connection point allows and there's a plug behind there. That allows the site to keep the roll-up generator's batteries up and charged if we're not able to be utilizing the site's generator.
Empty space.
Kilowatts.
We need 4 chillers with 3 of them on at any time. So this is the pump room. One pump is always on, one is always on standby. In the back is the water treatment system for rust inhibitors and mold growth and other treatments to keep the water in.
And we have our own private water supply here.
It's its own metered water.
Its own metered water.
back to the landlord if they want to. I think it's just cash. And so much of the problems on ground leases is that towards the end of the ground leases,
So, in the extra money I had, I bought a little extra of the structural steel, but there's some more I-beams in that that'll be needed. We have up top the connection stubs, which will need to be cut in for the supply and return lines, which will go ahead when the extra I-beams are in place to drop the supply and returns for chiller number 4, which goes over there, and chiller number 3, which goes here. We'll also need to put in the remaining conduits along with the wiring and automation controls and the equipment pads. But since chiller design isn't necessarily consistent, we didn't want to put a pad and it's not be the right size, but the space is now plenty of room for the appropriate pad with the conduits.
It's kind of tight.
They the best architect in Los Angeles to design this.
No, I'm just saying, like, being in the space, it feels tighter than you can fit 2 more chillers here. I'm sure the architects know what they're doing. Hang on a second, let me measure.
It's manageable.
Thanks.
So this is the site loading dock here. We have the Grand Height loading dock. We've sealed over a couple of the other ones, but one loading dock bay worked just fine for us. In here we have one of the telecom entry points.
There's one thing to say, hey, there's no 4,000 foot building or 1,000 foot building.
So in here we have some of the conventional building power systems and part of the site's telecom feed. When we go into the main computer room, I'll show you where the 2 overhead conduits land inside. And this is also the roof access to the building.
Is this where all the fiber runs through?
There's underground conduits that sweep up in the computer room itself.
Okay. So this is all telecom. This is not fiber.
Yes.
Okay.
So when the bank moved into the site, we put a new roof on 2005. We did some structural modifications to the I-beams on the roof to give the roof a little bit more slope. We replaced the metal and we put on higher than code required insulation to help keep the building's operating HVAC side of the costs more reasonable.
Sure.
So
There's extra padding to keep it cool.
yeah, John's Manville insulation. So that's finished at the end of 2005.
Okay. Now we're going into the.
This is the building proper.
Okay.
So this is the receiving and shipping bay. In here you can see the overhead return and supply lines for the chiller plant which we've just left.
Okay.
You can also see some of the data cabling overhead which came from the roof access room that we were just in, and we'll end up in A row inside the property. As the bank's interests were keeping the site secure, we left one of the prior single-use restrooms, which allows the delivery drivers who are at the site to not have to go into the sensitive parts of the building and just be contained to the shipping and receiving bay.
You get that, Dave?
I did.
So this is the staging area.
Staging area.
And for unboxing and boxing, this is the prep area to get servers ready to deploy to the floor. We have some limited power available mounted to the rack here for server builds.
Very cool.
And there's some other twist lock plugs to supplement what the half rack has. So,
Okay.
And that goes out to the raised floor area?
over there. But we'll go through the power plant first. And some of that explanation fills in.
And that's anti-static flooring?
It's just rubber flooring.
Alan, is the only single point of failure that we've walked through so far the 1500 kilowatt transformer?
Yes.
Yeah.
You realize your pals, like,
In here, you can see where the chilled water supply and return splits. Because of the high heat load, when the electrical rooms, electric room A and electric room B, which we'll go through, are operating, rooftop package cooling wasn't adequate. So we designed it to operate with crack units. Electric room C back here is just some supplemental building power. It's like the lights in the ceiling, the ones mounted to the building, card readers, cameras, conventional outlets.
It's all kind of general building.
Yeah.
This is general building
Couple of
power
rooftop
here.
package units,
Gotcha.
fire alarm system, just the back of the house that you just need to operate, but isn't critical.
Do you help design this and work here?
Yeah, site selection, design and build, construction, operations,
What was your role at the bank?
critical facility manager. So basically anywhere in the bank that used power, water, HVAC, and supplemental power generators and UPS, I took care of it. But as they were outsourcing everything and going under Colo, there wasn't a lot of opportunity. So I had to go in a different section. And my boss and most of my coworkers were leaving around the same time.
Oh, right.
So
Okay.
if you're interested in more, we can talk separately. So on the wall here, we have the card reader system. I'll open one of the cabinets so you can see what it looks like. Oh, I actually don't think I've got that key on me, but
Okay.
basically, it's 3 occupied cabinets and 1 for expansion. In the larger design, we were going to segment each row as its own secured zone to run off the card readers. So the card reader system works right now. It just needs its own standalone software and computer badge printing end and a software license to operate. We left all the card readers intact and operational, but since we don't have the software, that's why we're going around on card keys. But it's not a large undertaking, and the contractor who installed it is here locally in the valley.
You still hear the contractor. Okay.
Yeah. So, electric room A and electric room B in the opposite corner are the mirror flips of each other. So the contents are the exact opposite in the other room. So right now, the SRP feed comes into this room.
The power feed.
Yes. Because the dust that's in this is probably as expensive as your car. So let's go down what's going on in this room. So this is the current main feed.
Say it again?
So this is the current main feed with the SRP meter and the primary disconnect to that. We have redundant feeds. So what you see in here is duplicated on the other side. So we had one module right at top. I had some extra money, so I bought additional breakers. So the second and third battery strings, the breakers are here, but there's nothing on the other end of them present. I have everything labeled and marked. What it should normally be doing, as the site is in standby right now, not everything matches the labels, but for ease of operation, it's labeled what it should be when it's an operational site, but as some components are missing from the site, some are not in their proper configuration at the moment. To protect the site, we have multiple automatic transfer switches to split the risk. So ATS UA is dedicated just to UPS A side power automatic transfer switch. And ATS MA handles the mechanical, lighting, and other supplemental wires. Right now, as there is no batteries attached to it, the UPS module is in standby, as you can see by the breaker being tripped into the not off and not on position, which is why it's in the center. And you find the connections mirrored on the static transfer switch, preventing power going to the UPS module. Warranties and things like that, it's all expired. That's all expired. But you wouldn't get longer than a 10-year warranty because the technology is young. But we've operated it safely. If you do the infrared scans and you're smart about how you manage your power, it's not there. I've ran older data centers with much more obsolete gear than this, and this is not obsolete. You can still buy most of this. Okay. It's just a matter of no factory would give you a 20-year warranty, because just with the projection of technology, it's like you would buy a 10-year-old computer now. So in here, we're meant to ultimately have two tractors. We have one day, one now. We have the stub for the power feed to it, which is an energy conduit, and then a control and fire alarm interface. And then up at the top, if you probably stand on the end of it, you can see the ratcheting valves, which will allow the supply and return lines to come over here, run down the wall, and there to supply the backup units. So this is half of the PDU side distribution. As with the UPS, I had some extra money, so I bought a couple extra breakers, and there's space for other. So this is all A-side PDU power. And then this is half of the computer room cooling power and one of the two chillers, as you can see on the label plate there. The mirror setup, both power-wise and cooling-wise, is in electric room B on the other side of it.
So, if B is the same as this.
Most,
Okay.
but there's some expansion in there which is worth noting. So here we have the leak detection system, which charts on the map to follow the chiller water supply and returns in both of the rooms. We have the halon gas detection system over here, which when all of the battery modules are in, will need the additional sensors, but there's room for it to exist.
Cool.
So, System Edison was the general, and we had some who worked directly with the System Edison was the general contractor, and then some contractors who had worked for the bank before. So this is battery room A. So half of the batteries that the site would utilize would go in here. The curb was resilient enough that we left it in here. The cement mix on B's curb was failing, so we knocked that curb out when we were back. So one battery spring would sit on the curb, we would bore a second curb with a second spring, and then the third spring would go into the adjacent source as should the intended curb work.
And this is all on the expansion of
Yeah.
And is there enough capacity in here from a storage perspective to maintain up to the 6, or this is accommodating for it?
This is just an accommodated, so
Say it's on that.
this will accommodate 2/3 of that, because we'll need the additional footprint,
So there's one curb, and then they're saying that they will build another curb along this wall, and another curb in another room, and this is for the batteries.
My question is, do we have to build or reconfigure the space to add more capacity for things like battery and all the equipment in these rooms?
It's very minor.
It's very minor.
Yeah.
If we were to go to 3,
Yeah,
and then what about to 6?
it's the same thing. It's
It's
just,
double?
it's scalable. We had the first third, there are 2 other sections and thirds that could come into existence based on our design.
Okay, so you've planned for it.
Yeah,
Are there 2 battery rooms or 3?
there's 2 battery
Two
rooms.
batteries. So
So
there's no
battery
room
room A and B supplied off of electric room A and B. So this is an explosion-proof room owing to the nature of the batteries. For the second battery string to be operable in here and its counterpart room across the hall, an additional exhaust fan is required by code, and an additional HVAC package unit is required. It's not a human thing, it's just eliminating the single point of failure and allowing the rooms to operate in optimal.
Camera.
So the explosion-proof lights mostly stay off since you don't have Battery room B is at its full size and requires no construction.
So A and B, I'm sorry, I'm asking the same question over and over again, but A and B would essentially accommodate up to how much power based on the capacity of the site?
Well, it's basically,
Doesn't matter?
it's somewhat limited by the height of the floor. There's calculations that need to be done. Due to the floor height, you can only get cooling so high in the rack.
Okay.
I've got contractors we can have this discussion with based on what your demands may be not the same as the bank.
Okay.
So it's important that the site has all the flexibility anybody can need. It's just a matter of how and where the power lands and how the cooling is managed is a very precise science. This isn't something we do off the shirt cuff.
I was gonna say, you can't just scribble on a napkin the math real quick?
I'm afraid not. I'd rather give you the honest answer than blow a lot of hot air.
Appreciate that.
So, as with battery room A, battery room B, for code compliance, we'll need a second supplemental exhaust blower, it's a fairly small undertaking, and a second rooftop package unit to accommodate the additional heat load that the other batteries will represent. So the first string where the concrete batch wasn't the greatest went along that wall and then down to there. We blew the curb out and resealed the floor. The second one would go from where the thermostat is on the wall, leaving a little space for the eyewash station, and then in between the two light switches, and the third set, bookcases back to back in the center of the room, and pour the pads as we do the batteries.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So each battery string would get its own service disconnect, similar to the one that we have. Battery room B is the rear flip-up bay. Electric room,
Okay. Same exact thing as electric A?
except this has the feeds for the future transformer and the future generator.
This one has the feeds for the future transformer and future generator.
So, as we weren't quite sure where the generator would land, those stub right to the foot of the building, and we'll need to run into the appropriate location when the generator and its pad get poured. The other ones go to the transformer pad, which we saw outside.
So this is where all the expansion is coming from.
Yeah. So in electric room A, the switchgear you saw on the back wall will be duplicated to manage the power from the second transformer. It isn't here now, but the space is meant for it. As with the other room, it's the mirror duplication. A dedicated UPS automatic transfer switch, just like electric room A, and a dedicated mechanical switch for the B side of the distribution, HVAC lighting supplemental power set. The service switch, as again, is in standby, as is the B module to the UPS. I thought that was helpful. In here, we have the second half of the computer room air conditioning, and then the second half of the PDU power is on the other side. then we have the same in-use breaker and expansion breakers for the battery modules, which will go to UPSB, which we were just at. And then we have the landing points to allow us to put the meter in when the transformer shuts off.
Landing points to the meter when the transformer shuts off.
It's a lot of work.
All right.
Coming up through the floor at the end of the infrastructure hallway is the site's emergency standpipe. The bank's insurance company, Factory Mutual, had us put that in after we lost the underground feed due to utility damage for the site's supplemental sprinkler system. So now we are able to attach to the standpipe and attach to a site fire hydrant, which is a separate feed from the sprinkler feed, and backfeed the sections of the building that are operated by what's sprinkler pipe as opposed to pre-action.
Cool.
So,
it's redundancy of the sprinklers.
on the water line side. Most of the building is pre-action because naturally water in a indoor environment is very dangerous. And we need halon tanks the size of gas tankers to be able to handle it to do it. So pre-action was deemed to be the best alternative, but because it took the city of Tempe several days to fix the fire feed back in 2008, they said this would be a good supplemental way, and they adjusted our insurance rates lower since we had spent the resources to bypass being cut off from the city's water feed. So now we'll go up to the command center and the main computer floor.
Thanks.
So this is an alternative route to go through the loading dock, so you don't have to go through the staging and build room.
Office area?
So, operating under the idea that not necessarily everyone would be based here would necessarily have the need or clearance to go into either the main computer room floor or the NOC. We have fingerprint scanners at both of those doors to operate under a slightly more advanced security level.
Does that all go through the same software that was
Yes.
for the card reading?
All of the vendors who have operated at the site are open to the idea of returning and would be available to have meetings to discuss some of the prep and corrective.
Sure. Yeah, so we got a vendor list that we can communicate with.
Yeah, so. One thing that the bank dealt very heavily in in any construction project that we did is that the installing contractors were offered the ability to stay with the site in the maintenance, operations, and repairs phase under the strict condition that they brought their service and repair people in while we were in the build phase to allow the service and repair techs to have input on what they were doing to make the site easier to service and maintain.
Good policy.
So along the wall here are the fire systems for both the pre-action spaces as well as the back of the house, which is on conventional piping. So on the fire annunciator board, the addressable devices will light up, which will allow the precise location of if a heat detector is going off, if a pull station is going off in any of the pre-action spaces, as it's a more advanced system. So the software that is built into this is proprietary under license, but Westfire, the vendor, has my authorization to transfer the bank's special written software over when the new site occupant
cool.
comes in.
Thank you.
So this handles the pre-action sections of the building. This handles the conventional office spaces. This is just batteries. Not wanting to rely solely on the ceiling mounted smoke detectors, we have air sampling, which draws above the ceiling and then below the floor. And we also tie into the conventional smoke detectors, which are in the Liebert crack units.
Okay.
And those come from the factory, so we just made use of them as that. We also have leak detection, which follows the pipe of the path around the perimeter of the room, and then the stub overhead, which is reflected in ceiling and subfloor.
Okay.
So this is all just basically automation, harness wiring, and the EPOs. So the NOC console power is set to operate through the battery UPS fed side. So in the event of power, the console operators' desktop computers will be able to stay online while the generator is gearing itself up to supply the supplemental power to the site.
How deep is the raised floor? 18 inches?
That's the next stop.
He'll pull.
As it's an odd size, I purposely keep a tape measure here to show exactly what it is.
Your engineers will want to know the depth of the raised floor.
Okay.
So, so the power goes under the floor. You can see a section of the grounding grid close to my feet there. And just slightly over.
Wow, that's what is it? 27 inches.
That's great.
Okay.
So,
What's that
Are you
meters?
cooling from underneath?
So floor
Yeah.
is raised. Yeah, what's that in meters is right?
Do you have hot and cool aisles, or?
ultimately, yes.
Hot and cool aisles.
The IT department also had some extra money, so they bought some extra 2-post racks and some extra 4 traditional cabinets.
Rats are already here.
So, as you can see around the perimeter of the room, some of the power is in place already. So as you see, this is the head end of the feed from UPS room A and battery room A, and then it's mirrored from UPS B and electric room B. So there is space to allow for the additional A and B PDUs to go on the inner perimeter of the room. The outer perimeter of the room is meant to have the crack units up against the wall. You can see under the floor, the labeled electrical whips are all identified under the floor with where they're fed from. And this is, orange pipe is part of the pre-action air sampling, which you can see additional units above there. Because we don't want to wait until it gets to the conventional smoke detectors. This is a sort of preemptive sensing of it.
Gotcha. So about how many racks are in here?
We can count them if we need to.
Yeah, I think we should. That would be good information.
6, 7 numbered here.
So as you can see with the space here, so PDUs 1 and 2 are down there, both the A and the B side. PDUs 3A and 3B would go here in the gap. 4 exists, and then it fills around the rest of the room.
Alan, you're loading, you're double loading on this side and then on that side with servers, right? So each one of these cabinets
It's 2 racks.
would be 2 racks, right?
Ultimately, yes.
Right. So then you got about 300 racks here.
300 racks
in
here.
place. Yeah.
So
A little more than that.
we've
There's room
also
to expand. There's more room on the other side for one of these cabinets.
So we've also labeled in the cabinets with the specific whip number so you don't have to open the floor. Each one has its own wire ground attached to that grounding grid that you saw earlier. And the rack mount PDUs are the same on both sides. So the idea would be to buy dual corded equipment and balance the power and cord load evenly to both sides.
Very cool.
So there's room for additional racks, additional vent tiles, and additional overhead return grills will need to be put in as the demand increases. But that's fairly straightforward.
Did
It's
you
an
ever
easy
have
one.
three? Did you ever have all these racks full?
About halfway up. Mostly the bank in the latter years used blade server chassis. So the deliverable cooling could only get so far up into the rack.
Alan, what, is there anything that we've looked at so far that's, you know, drastically obsolete?
No.
Oh, he's so careful about his answers. He's not going to
That's
say
a
no.
good thing,
unless-
right? That's a great thing for me. Trust me.
So there are a few little things. You need a coat of paint here, shampoo the carpeting. There's nothing functionally wrong with the site.
And still the only single point of failure that we've seen is the power.
It's basically the attachment to the outside utility going through a single generator and a single switch.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah, there are some improvements. If I had had more money, that wouldn't be that involved. I would have considered and are certainly still on the table. Just to give you a little wider view of how things operate under the floor, we'll take a detailed look here at crack unit 29. So crack unit 29 is typical of the crack units in the room. So there are 5 on this side of the room, and there are 5 on the other side of the room. We rotate around to keep the wear and tear even on them. So what's under the floor here is each one has a dedicated supply and return line that comes off the main trunk. And the main trunk runs the entire perimeter of the room in a loop. I'll actually open the next one since it's got the labels on it. So the supply runs around the room as arrows indicate, and the return does the exact opposite. And those match up to the pipes that we've seen in the receiving bay and then the chiller plant. So when crack 29 is operational, the mechanical driven Belimo valves will open, pressurizing the pipe and allowing the chilled water to circulate through the coil, past the fan section. Fan blows the air out, up through the vent tiles and out into the room. The hot air that comes out the discharge side of the server goes up the vent tiles, through the T-bar grid, through the chase at the top of the unit, back through the crack unit, round and round in endless repetition.
Where's it connected to the ceiling?
Through the open vents there.
Oh, gotcha.
So the hot air,
Okay, so yeah,
this part was out of the back of the server, and the suction, when all these are on, will draw it directly up.
Just another view of the office
More
space,
noise from the IT side.
at least one of them.
We've had almost every rack occupied at one point or the other. It was never disturbing.
Yeah.
It's just, it sounds like a computer room, as you would expect.
Yep. How many racks are there in this room?
There are 10 presently.
Let's get a workout.
Very cool.
Well, the tiles are all cement-loaded cores because you wouldn't want a light tile because otherwise when you're moving like an EMC rack, you'll blow through the tile.
Yeah, exactly.
So it has to be robust.
So it's a concrete. Gotcha.
So here you can see 3 of the 4 air sampling systems. The other one is down at the end of the room, which we'll go to shortly.
Air sampling systems.
Yeah, so it's a preemptive smoke detector.
Oh, preemptive
So
smoke
it
detector.
airs, so by suction, it's drawing particles from the orange pipes you see overhead, and then that orange pipe I showed you in front of K-row.
Yeah.
And it draws it in to preemptively catch it before we're having to rely solely on the ceiling-mounted conventional smoke detectors.
Very cool.
As in the event of a fire, which should never happen, you want to catch it as soon as possible. So, at each of the 3 doorways in the computer floor are a A-side EPO and a B-side EPO, which reflect the A and B distribution which occurs upstream.
Sorry.
This is the site fire equipment room. As we're on a pre-action system, the pipes in the computer room, the NOC, and then the power plant are all charged with compressed air, which this compressor supplies overhead. Backing that up are these huge pneumatic valves which keep the water, which is in this part here, on its own side. So it takes a multiple event to get water into either the computer room, the NOC, or the power plant.
Gotcha.
So you would have to not only have the fusible link and the sprinkler head go off, something else has to happen for this controlled valve to open up. So somebody would have to pull a pull station, a smoke detector would have to go off, the pre-action detection would have to go off as a secondary event.
Gotcha.
So we've done the 5 years and all of the preventative that it needs. This is where the standpipe from the front of the property connects on an in-through, and this is the water feed for the traditional sprinklers in the front office areas.
Pretty big. I mean, 300 racks. Motion sensor lights.
The only thing we need to set apart is for the breakers. As on the B side and the A side, these march in pairs to give you down, both rapid
Lay one side,
potential.
be on the other.
I have to,
Oh, okay.
because
So he
not every row is built out.
He thinks that given the floor space here, there's a potential for 300 racks in here.
There is 300 racks in here.
He said he doesn't think he said potentially.
Well, I haven't counted them, so.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean,
You're
there's
the first
because
company
each
that's
one of
ever
these
asked that question.
each one of these racks can be accessed from each side of it, which
Right.
makes one rack 2 racks.
Maybe.
You know,
I don't-
unless we need 300
Dual-
two-sided racks.
Yeah, I don't know. the
Then
answer.
that would be a totally different story, right?
So, and by the same token, the same A and B circuit breaker power comes on this side.
Yeah.
So what that allows you to do is a cost savings measure we put in the design phase, which means when you're going and you're running your electrical whip under the floor, you basically only have to run half the length of the room, which keeps the materials cost for the whips down.
Yeah.
As opposed to having to transverse the entire length.
That's right. Okay.
I mean, the real expense is operating the IT gear in there. The whips are a negligible cost. But it's a way to help keep the construction costs down on the site, is that you only have to go halfway across the room to have your safe redundancy. So, in the chiller loop, which is also going through here, which is the same as seen on the other side, there are mechanical stubs in the supply and return lines to allow the future units to set in place. So like 13 is there in the corner, 14 would go here,
14 goes
and
here.
15 and 16 are already present.
15 and 16 are already present. Okay. Okay.
So this is the isolation room here.
Uh-oh.
The bank set this up specifically to allow developers access to some systems within the bank's control, but not to the wider bank network. It was basically for us to develop mobile and online banking software, update the ATMs and all that, but not allow access to the core customer accounts, proprietary data, and other such.
I understand.
In your business model, there may be a use for it. now it's just housing for the Cox backup fleet.
All right.
So the A row here is the network row that allows the outside world to talk to each of the individual rows.
Okay.
So some rows like row D is just evidence of the IT people having some extra money and put some extra two-post racks there. There is no cabling or power there at the moment, but there's the opportunity to do so. All of the cabling here, as you'll notice, is in a meticulous shape. We had gone through 3 months of vetting a data cabling contractor to wire the site. So everything,
Yeah, the wires look very clean.
everything is labeled, out-road,
Labeled, Velcroed, no tie wraps.
put in place. The fiber is in the yellow ducts to keep it separated from the conventional cabling. So, this is the primary connection point for the main provider, which is CenturyLink.
CenturyLink, okay.
The bank had to do quite some wheeling and dealing to be able to have CenturyLink's gear remain with the site, but obviously it's here because CenturyLink is anticipating that the site would remain a data center and therefore resume its service. I'll be right back. So this is the primary attachment point for the manholes which we saw out on the Beck Avenue
Out on the
entrance,
driveway, yeah.
and then its mirror component on the Range Avenue. So 2 of the 4 are in use right now, and then there are 2 spares which are intended for future growth of the site. And one follows the occupied one to Ranch Road, and one follows the occupied one to Beck Avenue. Yes. So that way, the risk of losing one conduit due to damage or unforeseen circumstance is protected by the fact that a duplicate comes from the other side of the road. I'm not positive that would be a IT thing, but I believe it's supposed to be separate. Because there's also a Cox box and a CenturyLink box on that other side of the road. It should be separate, but